Imagine standing on the shore. The sand beneath your feet is familiar and cool. You inhale deeply, expecting the familiar sharp scent of the sea, the smell of seaweed, salt, and freedom. But it's not there. The air is clean and fresh, like the surface of a giant lake. Take a sip. The water that has burned wounds and throats for centuries is now soft, almost tasteless. This is not a metaphor. It's a new day. What happened? Look at the horizon. The waves still roll onto the shore. The sun plays on the crests, but it's an optical illusion. The entire world ocean, from the darkest depths of the Mariana Trench to the warm lagoons of tropical islands, has lost its salt. Overnight, one chemical parameter has changed dramatically. How is this possible? We won't find a giant filter or alien device here. It's a given, a fact. Conduct a simple experiment. Dip your hand in the water and touch it with your tongue. You won't feel the familiar bitterness. Now look at the coastal rocks. They're no longer white from dried salt. Their surface is clear. The salt haze over the water's surface, distorting the air, has disappeared. Distant objects are visible with unusual, almost frightening clarity. Now consider this. What keeps a mighty aircraft carrier afloat? What allows a steel vessel to cut through the waves? The density of salt water. It pushes its supports. Will anything change now? Not yet. The ships will remain afloat. But what will happen to the life that filled this water? Millions of species whose cells, gills, and metabolism were tuned to a strict salt balance. They evolved in a salty environment for billions of years. Now imagine your blood being replaced overnight with distilled water. The consequences for marine ecosystems would be immediate and irreversible. This isn't an apocalypse in the conventional sense. It's a switch, a fundamental change in the rules of the game for the entire planet. From this moment on, our world, our home, became different. And the first chapter of this new era is being written not in scientific laboratories, but right here, on the shore, where the ocean has forgotten its taste. Now let's move away from the shore. The initial shock will give way to the question, what next? The world hasn't plunged into darkness, but let's check the pulse of civilization. Go to an outlet. Flip the switch. Is there power? Lucky. Now imagine. Giant coastal power plants that fed entire continents. Their reactors required colossal cooling. For this, they used the ocean, an endless and reliable heat exchanger. Seawater, with its different heat capacity and corrosive properties, passed through kilometers of pipes. Replace it with fresh water. The current will slow. Scale will clog the channels. Systems designed for a salty environment will begin to fail. Automatic systems will shut down. And then silence. Not the hum of turbines, but emergency sirens. This is not a scenario. It is already happening somewhere right now. Take a look at the ports. What do you see? Where activity usually bustles, an unnatural calm reigns. Ships are moored at their berths. International flights have been cancelled. Why? Because shipping is more than just maps and courses. It's about highly accurate forecasts that take into account water density, salinity, and current behavior. The sailing directions that guided ships for centuries are instantly out of date. Depths can change. Underwater currents driven by salinity gradients have disappeared. The ocean has become homogeneous. Navigation has become a game with blind pieces on an unknown board. The risk of collisions and groundings has become unacceptably high. Global logistics, the world's artery, has come to a standstill. And now look up. The sky is also empty. Coastal airports depended on stable weather conditions dictated by the ocean. Warm, salty currents formed atmospheric fronts. Now this mechanism is broken. A gigantic mass of freshwater vapor now lies over what was once the ocean, ready to crash onto land in unpredictable downpours, or, conversely, create zones of unprecedented pressure. Flying in such conditions is Russian roulette. Pilots remain grounded. So the picture is emerging. This isn't an instantaneous cataclysm, but a chain reaction. Power outages. Transportation halts. Communications are disrupted. A civilization built on the predictability of the ocean is confronted with a new, unfamiliar version of it. The next question is, how long will cities survive when the last generators go silent? Now look at the water, not at its surface, but deep within. Imagine you're a marine creature. Your body, every cell, is tuned to life in a salty environment. It's a balance honed over millions of years of evolution. And now, overnight, your environment has been replaced with distilled water. What's happening? Osmotic pressure is disrupted. Water from outside begins to penetrate the cells, causing them to swell. Salt is lost, and with it, the ability to absorb oxygen and transmit nerve impulses. This isn't a slow process. It's an instantaneous physiological collapse. Let's return to the shore. Take a closer look at the surf line. What you see is an algae. It's millions of tons of dead biomass. Fish, from small fry to giant whales, mollusks, jellyfish. Their gills, their membranes couldn't withstand the change. They didn't drown. They choked on fresh water at the cellular level. Their bodies are washed ashore by the waves, creating a continuous multi-kilometer barrier of death along all the planet's coastlines. The smell is not of salt and iodine, but of decomposition. Look below the surface. If you had a bathyscaphe, you would see the apocalypse in slow motion. Coral reefs, the great cities of the ocean, have begun to bleach and crumble. Their calcium carbonate skeletons cannot form in fresh water. They turn into formless chalk dust. Algae, the foundation of the food chain, die. Their chloroplasts, which require specific ions from seawater, cease photosynthesis. Color disappears. All that remains is a murky, greenish suspension. What does this mean for you? Forget about seafood. Fishing fleets rumble aimlessly in ports. Nets are empty. Canneries are shutting down. Sushi bars are closing. This isn't a temporary hiatus. It's the end of an entire industry, a source of protein for billions of people. A food chain that began in the ocean is broken at its base. Now ask yourself one final question. Who's next? The seabirds that fed on fish, the coastal predators that scavenged. Everyone whose existence was woven into the saltwater ecosystem now faces a void. The chain reaction is just beginning. The first wave of death has swept across the ocean. The second will cover land. Now let's move away from the aftermath of the disaster and look ahead. The main question arises, can this process be reversed? Imagine the scale of the task. The volume of water in the world ocean is approximately 1.5 billion cubic kilometers. How can we return salt to this mass? The first thing that comes to mind is to simply start pouring it in. But take a handful of table salt and throw it from a dock into the water. It will dissolve, having no effect. Now imagine having to evenly mix the salt with this entire mass of water. You'll need not ships, but entire fleets of spreader tankers operating for decades. This is a gigantic logistical operation, comparable to terraforming. But let's approach the problem from a different angle. Consider the desert. Under tons of sand lie layers of rock salt, salt domes. What if we drilled thousands of wells and injected saturated brine, not solid salt, into the deep ocean trenches? It's like trying to inject the planet with a needle. We need to find salt deposits on the seafloor, build underwater drilling platforms, and lay kilometers of pipelines across the abyssal plains. It's an engineering challenge like no other. Now consider the third option. Look at a conventional desalination plant. It takes seawater and separates it into fresh water and concentrate. But what if we reverse this process? We'd need to build gigantic plants on the coast that wouldn't desalinate but desalinate. They'd take fresh ocean water, add salt, and return it salty. Such complexes would require the energy of entire countries. Salt mines, quarries, and logistics hubs would have to be built nearby. Each of these projects runs up against the same fundamental law, the law of conservation of mass. To restore the ocean's salinity, we'd need to extract, transport, and dissolve approximately 3.5 billion tons of salt. This number is so enormous as to be meaningless. It's the weight of 7,000 Great Pyramids of Giza. It's a volume beyond comprehension. So what's the bottom line? Neither option is quick or easy. Each one requires a multi-year, if not centuries-long, mobilization of all human resources. It's a choice between a slow surface-level spray and a targeted strike at the depths. It's a question of whether humanity is ready to become a planet-repairing machine. And while this choice is being debated, the ocean remains fresh and the clock is ticking. Now imagine you're an engineer. You're faced with the task of salting the ocean. Where to start? The first step is finding the source of the salt. Look at a map of deserts. Beneath the sands of the Sahara, Gobi and Atacama lie massive sheets of rock salt. This is the legacy of ancient seas. The technology for extracting it is simple. Drill shafts, crush the rock, and deliver it to the coast. But imagine the scale. To influence salinity, trillions of tons are consumed. Salt must move on conveyor belts every second. Thousands of cargo ship trips every day. This will transform deserts into industrial landscapes and coastlines into gigantic transshipment hubs. But how to deliver salt to the center of the ocean? Consider a specialized spreader vessel. It would have to be as huge as an iceberg with open holds. It would be loaded with ground salt at the port and follow a predetermined route, leaving a white trail in its wake. But then the problem of turbulence arises. Salt doesn't dissolve immediately when it enters the water. It forms concentrated but localized lakes of brine on the surface. Mixing them with the water column requires propellers and paddle wheels to create artificial currents. The energy cost would be colossal. Now look deeper. The second method is deep-sea injection. Find salt domes on the ocean floor. Install a drilling platform over them. But this isn't an oil platform. It's a brine production plant. Drill a well into the salt formation. Inject water under high pressure. Obtain a saturated brine and release it through perforated pipes right at the seabed. This is more efficient as deep currents, albeit weakened, will help with distribution. But imagine the difficulty of maintaining such equipment at a depth of kilometers. The third option is to use nature itself. Rivers carry dissolved salts to the ocean, but their quantities are negligible. What if powerful evaporation ponds were built on all major rivers? The water will evaporate, and the remaining concentrate will be discharged into the ocean. This is a slow but constant process. It will transform river mouths into labyrinths of canals and dams. Each of these projects faces three constraints: energy, time, and materials. Their implementation will require the redirection of all the planet's resources. Steel, concrete, and engine production will be dedicated solely to this goal. This will be the largest construction project in human history, visible even from space. And all for the sake of restoring the ocean to its original flavor. Now look away from the ocean and down at your feet. At the soil, you see a field, a garden, a plantation. Their lives depended on fresh water, but also on a complex groundwater balance. In coastal regions, this balance was maintained by the pressure of salty ocean water. It prevented freshwater aquifers from penetrating deeper. Now this barrier is gone. Imagine a sponge soaked in fresh water and placed in a basin of salt water. The salt water surrounds the sponge but doesn't penetrate deeply. Now replace the salt water in the basin with fresh water. What happens? That's right. The contents of the sponge begin to actively mix with the surrounding environment. The same process has begun in coastal soils. Freshwater groundwater, no longer held back by a dense salt wedge, began to rapidly and uncontrollably flow toward the ocean. Freshwater levels in coastal zones are falling. Approach a well in such a region. Drop a weight on a rope. You'll find that water levels have dropped. Wells that have fed cities and farms for centuries are beginning to dry up. Irrigation systems that sustained crops are left without a source. Fields that were green yesterday are now cracking in the sun. This isn't a drought in the conventional sense. It's a change in hydrological regimes on a continental scale. What happens next? Look at the plant roots. They can no longer find moisture. Crops die. Farmers watch as fertile land turns to dust in a matter of weeks. This sets off a chain reaction. No harvest means no food. Prices for the remaining supplies begin to rise. Migration begins. People are leaving the coasts not because of flooding, but because of lack of water. They move inland, putting strain on the infrastructure of inland regions. Now look at the map. Many megacities are built at river mouths, on coastlines. Their water supply was tied to local sources. Now these sources are drying up. Cities with populations of over 1 million are beginning to experience severe water shortages. Austerity measures are being implemented. Industry, which consumed enormous volumes of water, is shutting down. This is no longer an energy crisis, but a water crisis. It is coming quietly, without spectacular catastrophes, but its consequences are far more profound. Without water, everything stops. Now look up at the sky. What do you see? Clouds, they appear the same as yesterday. But that's an illusion. The giant engine that has driven the planet's weather for centuries has just stopped. That engine was the ocean. Its salinity created density gradients that drove currents. Warm, salty currents like the Gulf Stream carried heat to high latitudes. Cold, deep waters sank. This global conveyor belt distributed energy across the globe. Now imagine turning off that conveyor belt. The ocean has become uniform. The temperature and density differences that moved water for thousands of kilometers have disappeared. The currents have slowed and stopped. What does this mean for you standing on the shore? First of all, the wind. It blows, but now it has nothing to rely on. Stable high-pressure areas no longer form over warm regions, and low-pressure areas over cold ones. The atmosphere loses its familiar patterns. Look at the barometer. Its needle is starting to behave erratically. It's impossible to predict the weather anymore. Where you expected a mild winter, bitter frost set in because the warm currents no longer warm the shore. Where monsoon rains used to fall, drought reigns because evaporation from the surface of the freshwater ocean behaves differently. In some regions, the sky is covered with leaden clouds for weeks, pouring down torrential rains that wash away the soil. In others, the sun blazes mercilessly, turning fields into deserts. This isn't just bad weather, it's a breakdown of the climate machine. Seasons cease to matter. The calendar becomes useless. Farmers don't know when to plant. Pilots can't plot a route. Coastal towns, protected from storms by coral reefs and mangroves, are left defenseless. The reefs are dead, and the waves, deprived of restraining currents, crash with renewed vigor. The Earth's climate was a complex symphony, with the ocean setting the primary rhythm. Now that rhythm has vanished. All that remains is chaotic noise, and each day becomes unpredictable. Now take a look at an industrial plant, any factory. Automotive, metallurgy, textiles. What do you see there? Inactivity. Machines are frozen. Conveyor belts are motionless. Why? Because the global economy is a single organism, and its arteries are cut. Remember, sea lanes are blocked. Air travel is paralyzed. This means parts manufactured on one continent can't reach an assembly plant on another. Raw materials are stuck at their ports of origin. There's no one and nowhere to transport finished goods. Look at the stock market screen. It shows not just a decline, but a collapse. Markets abhor uncertainty, and now there's more of it than ever. No one knows how to deliver goods, how to obtain raw materials, how to plan production. Investments are stalled. Trade contracts are being canceled. The global financial system, built on predictable flows, is reaching a dead end. Now look at the shelves in the store. They're emptying. And it's not just panic buying and stockpiling. Logistics chains, honed for decades for maximum efficiency, are broken. Bananas from Ecuador can't reach Europe. Electronics from Asia won't reach America. The just-in-time system has become a never system. Even local manufacturers are facing problems. How to deliver goods to neighboring regions when truck fuel becomes scarce due to the shutdown of refineries that depended on seaborne shipments. What's happening to money? Its value is beginning to fluctuate. Some currencies are weakening, others are trying to strengthen. But with the foundation of global trade, sea freight, destroyed, any financial transaction resembles a game of roulette. Pension funds, insurance companies, banks, all are on the brink. Without a functioning economy, money gradually loses its meaning, turning into colored pieces of paper. And finally, look at the construction site. It's frozen. Concrete, steel, glass, plastic. All these materials relied on global supplies and complex production chains. Now new buildings are not being constructed, and old ones are impossible to properly repair. Infrastructure is slowly but surely beginning to crumble. Civilization, having achieved incredible complexity, is faced with a problem that cannot be solved by targeted interventions. The system is failing on all fronts simultaneously. Now take the final step. Scan the horizon with your mind's eye. You see two fundamentally different images. First, thousands of ships methodically spray salt into the water. Deep well pumps pump brine into the abyssal plains. The lights of a gigantic salt processing plant construction site on the coast glow. This is the path to correcting the error, the path to returning the planet to its original settings. Humanity acts as a single organism. directing all its engineering thought and willpower toward restoring the status quo. Now abruptly change your perspective. Second, ports are being adapted for freshwater. New ships are being built, taking into account the different buoyancy and corrosion characteristics. Freshwater species, carp, perch, and wild carp, are being cultivated on former marine farms. Scientists in laboratories are working not on brine recipes, but on the genetic modification of surviving marine organisms, attempting to adapt them to the new conditions. This is the path of acceptance and adaptation, a path where humanity acknowledges the new reality and begins to adapt to it. Which path will humanity choose? Both. Some regions, possessing resources and technology, will focus their efforts on ocean regeneration. Others, more vulnerable or more practical, will immediately begin restructuring their entire economies and infrastructure for a freshwater world. A division will emerge. Saline alliances will emerge, cooperating on global projects, while freshwater coalitions will emerge, focused on domestic development and autonomy. This will not be a war. It will be a quiet, methodical divergence of strategies. Some will view the ocean as a sick person in need of treatment. Others, as a new neighbor with whom relations must be established. Finance, science, and production capacity will be divided between these two global objectives. The outcome is impossible to predict. Will the salt strategy succeed before the freshwater strategy becomes the new norm? Will the fragile freshwater ocean ecosystem be able to stabilize? Will Earth become a planet with two distinct oceans within one? A restored saltwater ocean and a new wild freshwater ocean? There is no answer. There is only a titanic task, beginning simultaneously in all directions. The final chapter of this story has not yet been written. It is being written right now.